hope this works. I'm not the most technically astute person in the world. But let's see if we can get this to go. Get rid of that. Let's get to my slide. Where am I? Slideshow. From the beginning. Okay. Is that all right? Everyone can see and hear, and yeah, I haven't actually done anything wrong there, which makes it's very refreshing. Well, welcome. And I was really delighted to be able to do this, actually, Lynn. It was not something cheeky. I didn't think it was cheeky at all. I thought it's great because I actually really love talking to people who share my passion and interest. And I know that I could be taking colds to Newcastle this evening in some of the bits of this presentation, because I know that all of you have huge amounts of expertise in this area. But I'm also aware that I wanted to just give a flavour of the things that I've been thinking about and doing, and some of the practical strategies that I've found have been working well for me and some of my colleagues and some of the kids that I still support, even though I am a pensioner. Just wanted to flag that one up, okay. To start with, I think at the moment everybody is feeling extremely anxious. There's a heightened level of anxiety around going back next week. And there's no way around that other than to actually focus, in my view, on the things that we can control at this current time. And that sounds quite cheesy and a bit blasé and simplistic. But actually, hand on heart, I do think that that's the case, because we could all catastrophize and worry about absolutely everything. All we can actually do, in essence, is try to keep ourselves and our children as safe as we possibly can, and make sure that they feel nurtured, they feel connected with us, and that they feel happy enough to get back into learning when they get into school. However, that really is predicated by this fact that I think that emotional catch-up now has to come first at this juncture. And I'm going to share at the end of the presentation briefly my recovery plan that I shared on Twitter on Monday morning, because I just wanted to flag up a few points, because I've been training and delivering things all week this week to various schools and institutions, and the heightened level of anxiety has really kind of got to me on one level, because I had presumed that a lot of people would be very organised, would be feeling much more okay about it, that there are lots of children being very resilient and managing things, but actually the kids who we thought were hugely resilient are all getting a bit more anxious. So when we go back, it's going to have to be about this emotional catch up and move away from this narrative of academic catch up. Anxiety, for me, we know presents itself in many different ways. And I think for those of us in the field of mental health who know about neuroscience, who are really au fait with all of that, we'll understand that, and we'll know how children's behaviour often is displayed in ways which, to people who don't understand the neuroscience, will think they're being rude, they're being aggressive, they're refusing to obey instructions. But we know that your kind of cognitive processes, your working memory, for example, is impacted upon in a negative way when you are feeling overwhelmed. So lots of us will be slower at the moment. We will be finding things like processing information, remembering what we've got to do, you know, actually fulfilling expectations. We'll be over planning in terms of trying to compensate for that. And we'll be over worrying, and we will get some psychosomatic side effects, some of us. So we've got to be very clear that all of our teachers now, and all of those who are supporting our kids in school, really do understand this, because it's really important that no child or adult in any way feels punished for displaying signs of anxiety or symptoms of anxiety and trauma. We need to really move away from that. And I think also one of the most vital things now is that we know that this is on a continuum. There are kids who are hugely resilient and adults who are managing really quite well, but there are lots of people in the middle who are kind of struggling a wee bit. Then there's a small, significant minority who are really struggling. And we must actually take away the stigma here. And we've got to be COVID kind, I keep saying, as opposed to, you know, there's been a lot of cruelty, COVID cruelty around, in my view. I think we have to be very kind and very compassionate, and actually differentiate for the staff members and the kids who are finding this much, much harder. So we've got to be very compassionate, in my view. We can all do stuff right away to reduce anxiety. And I think there are 8 keys that I would put forward here. The structure and routine is absolutely key and essential. and really reinforcing when we get back into school what those structures are, what the routines are, the expectations, so that people can actually feel calm and centered. They know what what's expected of them. They know what's coming next. But also somehow those structures and routines may be different. So it's about really reassuring kids and really explaining it again and again in great detail, and then concisely in great detail, and then concisely what is expected of them. I think as well that there will be differences in the structures. For example, we know that 30 minutes in a classroom now is better than 2.5 hours in the same classroom because of the number of particles in the air. We know about the air that needs to go through the system in order to actually take those particles out. So there will be differences in the routines and the structure of the day. I'm convinced of it in many of our schools, or there should be, in my view. Kids are going to need exercise, play and free time, much more of that. There's a huge amount of research that's come out recently, and the BPS has got some of it on their website, so make reference to this. Kids need to exercise and play. They need the endorphin factor from that, as do we. And this is really important, that the day is punctuated with that, as it is also with experiences of flow, so in the moment experiences that are creative, etc. But also building those quality times together. Really important. I think that many of our children have missed us. They've missed being together. They've missed their friends. This came out in the co-space study. They've just done an update from that study at the University of Oxford. And I think one of the biggest things that came out of that was children's need to be with other kids and to socialise, and their love, dare I say it, of their teachers. They want to be back with them. And I think vice versa. Limiting access to the news. I can't factor this into my thinking enough, actually. I feel very strongly that our children have been fed a narrative that they are the COVID catch-up generation, that it's all bad, it's all horrible. Every single one of them is going to have these huge mental health problems in the future. It's going to impact on their ability to earn a living, etc., etc. I would like to be a bit more pragmatic and kind of unpick that a bit, because I think we have to be very careful that we're giving children this narrative, which could become a self-fulfilling prophecy and increase levels of anxiety. So we need to reduce the access to news. All of us do, in my view. Just take the bits that we need to know at any point in time. But for our kids now, for our children, I think they need to be given more hopeful messages, and they need to be listened to. We mustn't think that we have the one-size-fits-all solution for them and their worries. We need every single child to, in my view, have what I call a COVID passport. I'm going to come on to this in a bit more detail, so that they can actually tell us what they need. And some of them will say, do you know what, I think I've really got behind in my reading, I've really got behind in my writing. Actually, I'm really worried, I've got no friends. I've lost all my friends since I've been at home. I'm really worried I won't be able to catch up. I'm really worried about being in that busy corridor. I don't think I can cope with wearing a mask all day. It's going to make me feel as though I'm suffocating. I'm worried about the noise. I'm worried about going out to play. I don't know that I can manage being with all those other kids, etc. So it's about asking them, but reflecting and focusing on the positives and reinforcing the fact that we're here together, we're safe, we're going to nurture you. And actually, all of us, we've had so many good times in our learning, so many good experiences before, we can have them again. So it's about giving hope and building and maintaining those relationships again. But it's also about looking after the adults. I very strongly feel that I've been working with a couple of teachers doing some supervision, senior managers, and I'm very well aware of the levels of stress and anxiety that they are experiencing, and the need for them to really engage in better self-care. And that, again, it can sound quite cheesy, but I really think this is an absolute essential. If they're not self-regulated, we know they can't regulate kids. It's impossible. If they're not self-regulated, they can't support the staff to engage in self-regulation activities, those focused peer groups, peer supervision meetings where everyone feels supported. So 8 significant keys, I think. We also, I think all of us every single member of the staff team in whatever role needs to engage in more emotion coaching. They need to be able to use skills of emotion coaching. And if you're not au fait with it, there is on my YouTube channel a session, one of the CPD coffee times, on emotion coaching specifically. So make reference to that. There's also a more detailed session on anxiety per se. So also, you know, go back and have a look at those if you feel that you would like more information. But in essence, it's quite simple. It's about listening, not dismissing the child's worries or fears, however they might seem quite sort of small or insignificant sometimes, or they might seem as kind of, you know, they're catastrophizing, they're blowing it out of proportion. That's not the point. The point is that we listen, we accept and we acknowledge it, and we validate it. Okay, it's okay that you feel like that. I understand it. I'd feel like that in your position. I would feel like that, or I do feel like that too, and this is why. But actually label that emotion, actually help them to recognize where it is in their body, how it feels in their body, and normalize it. This is normal to feel like this. You're not odd. There's nothing wrong with you per se. What we're doing here is we're going to help you now to sort this problem out, and we're going to work together to find solutions. I also think if a child is feeling being anxious, then we need to actually ensure that they can and have developed a toolbox of well-being for themselves. So they've got their grounding, their breathing, their mindfulness, thought challenging strategies that they can use. And really, those three for me are probably the three key ones that I use with children the most. And I think lots of the children that I work with, I would say, use those and incorporate those into their anxiety plans. So I want to flag up some of those today. What the task is about really is creating and resourcing what I call a recovery curriculum. And a head teacher who was rather cynical on Twitter the other week was kind of poo-hooing this whole idea and saying, you know, we mustn't call it recover, but actually recovery is actually a positive word in my view, because it signals that we get better at being back together again, we get better at our learning again, we get better at managing our heads again and our ways of thinking, we get better at managing our anxiety again, we get better at being together. So has to be trauma-informed, nurture first, and well-being. And the well-being, in my view, of the staff has to be absolutely paramount. And Dr. Chris Moore, who I would strongly advise anyone to follow on Twitter, is a fabulous educational child psychologist. He talked about these 6 keys to creating trauma-informed classrooms. So ensuring that kids felt a sense of belonging, things were predictable, it was highly organised, that there were regular opportunities to engage in self-regulation and co-regulation. Things were differentiated for each kid. Remember, not every child is going to need a bespoke therapeutic intervention now, but there are many kids coming in who will have been bereaved, etc., and will have encountered significant losses who will need that. But for many of our kids, they will need something slightly different. They will need something slightly more generalized. But every child at this present time, I think, regardless of their experiences, will need regular opportunities throughout the day to engage in some form of regulation, and also the building of relationship too. I talked about this notion of a COVID passport. I don't want people to call it that. I want to call it something like, I think my transition plan back to school, or my information sheet, as we would do when we are transitioning kids from year 6 to 7, okay? And I think that's really, really useful. This format comes from the Nurture UK's publication, which is the Transition Toolbox. But again, what I would want on this information for me coming back into school, for the child, ensuring that teachers know, is, you know, what I enjoyed about being at home, what I didn't like about it. I want to know what you're worried about, what you think you need to catch up with, what areas are your strengths, what things would you want more of, what would you like to be different, what are you hoping for? So that actually the staff get a really good picture of where each child is at, because they'll tell you what they need help with, rather than, you know, everyone being told we have all got to catch up academically. The grief and loss thing will be significant for some. I can't underestimate it. So I'm just flagging up this source from Nurture UK, which I know they've had funding from Barclays, which has been fantastic to be able to give this out to schools for free. The grief and loss thing is going to be quite significant, I think, for many of our adults and the children in school. I think the key thing to remember is grief is not linear. It's a circular process, cyclical process, and I think it's very, very personal and individual to the individual person. So we've got to be very, very careful again that what we're providing is bespoke, okay, to that individual child or adult. And I think for us as adults too, we've got to think about our own support plans. If we have lost someone, sadly, I've lost 3 people this year. One of my students who I did supervision for last week has lost 9 close family members. And I think that there are going to be people who have really had some hugely traumatic experiences of loss now. So we need to think carefully about the time and space that they have to grieve, to think, the self-care routines, the talking opportunities that they might have, whether or not we allocate talking partners or external resources to some staff members in particular, and children. And we've got to be observant of each other here. And this is again what I'm saying about COVID kindness. We have to be kind to each other and make sure that no one is in any sense stigmatized or demonized because they're finding it harder than maybe I am or you are. I'm a great believer in positive psychology. I live and breathe positive psychology. I don't look for deficits generally in people. I focus on solutions, what works, and building on strengths. And I think most of us in our daily lives are capable of experiencing far more happiness and contentment than many of us do, because we have all got the propensity, some more than others, to be overwhelmed by anxiety. So I'm just flagging up some of the things that are included in my toolbox of well-being in terms of ideas for building happiness, such as expressing gratitude, savouring happy memories, surrounding yourself with lovely things that remind you good memories like photos, plants, pets, things that make you feel good. And then of course the 3 kinds acts, the 3 good things. I'm going to go into that in a bit more detail going on to the next slides. In the first lockdown, I wrote a toolbox of well-being, which is a tiny publication, and that was done absolutely on purpose because everyone was overwhelmed, and I wanted people to be able to pick this up and say, I can teach my child this. I can actually use some of these strategies straight away. It makes sense to me. Oh, these are really good ways of looking after myself too, because I was working with lots of people who were saying to me, I just don't know what to do. I've got my kid at home and they are getting really, really anxious, and they didn't have access to any additional support. Sadly, so many people still don't. So this publication is actually structured in to 3 trauma recovery approaches, which is self-regulate, get moving mentally and physically, and connect for well-being. So I'm just going to go through them each very briefly. So this is about identifying and modulating our emotions, controlling our impulses, delaying gratification, making thoughtful and conscious choices, and setting realistic goals, i.e. ones that you can achieve. And I would actually say at the moment, let's not use the term goals. Let's talk about steps, small steps to success, because I think that is really, really important. Goals are just too overwhelming when we're all experiencing or navigating this pandemic. Are we actually modelling it? As I said earlier, if we don't model it, we're going to be letting our kids down. We're going to be letting everyone down, including ourselves, sadly. So we've got to put ourselves first here and really think about this, because we've got to be able to stay calm. We've got to find our calm. We've got to cognitively be able to really engage in problem solving. And we've got to actually also show some social self-control, okay? And I think that is really, really, it's these 3 key factors in my view that we need to be modelling as the adults in the situation. And calming down, okay, making that calm down jar. You'll know about this stuff, but again, this is from the toolbox, and it's just a simple thing for, I think, for younger children, some of our children with additional needs that I have used and recommended to parents. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method, you'll know this too, the 5 things you can hear, then 4 you can see, 3 you can touch. So just actually grounding yourself and learning how to do that and stopping in that moment. We need to do a bit more of the stop, hand on heart, deep breathing, and just actually engage in this kind of grounding. We get better at it the more we do it. This is not for everybody, and I really think we have to be careful about saying, look, it has to be what fits in your toolbox. So one size doesn't fit all. When I'm talking about all these strategies, I present them to children, young people and parents, but what I'm saying to them is make use of the ones that really work for you, and if they don't, then tweak them or change them or adapt them, reflect on it at the end of the week, what did and didn't work well. Visualization, again, really useful, so that imagining yourself gathering emotions, scrunching them up, putting them in a box. Imagine your thoughts as a song or a program you dislike, changing the channel. Okay, there's a train track one. There are lots and lots of different ones that are emanating from mindfulness. So again, lots of ideas are included here, but it has to be really something that suits the child. I'm very much against some of the ASD children that I've worked with being asked to engage in some mindfulness activities when they actually find that what it does is it actually brings back PTSD symptoms and memories, and they find it really difficult sitting with their eyes shut. If you've experienced trauma, that can be very, very difficult. So I think we have to just be careful about the mindfulness bit. I can come back to that if anyone wants to talk in more detail. Mental agility, so that's about analysing and challenging our negative thinking patterns. And again, this is CBT. I don't think you need to be a therapist to make use of tools and strategies from therapeutic approaches. I really don't. I think it's vital that we do this. Every single one of us can get better at managing our negative thoughts, okay? We all engage in what I call thinking errors. So doing ourselves down, blowing things up or catastrophizing, predicting failure, getting over emotional. We set ourselves up for failure. If we're anxious, we tend to make our goals far too big, or blaming ourselves, thinking that everything that's gone wrong in a situation is down to us. It's our fault. Okay. So, and what's really important is to remember that, you know, our thoughts are not facts. Okay. Very often we get it wrong. So we've got to teach kids how to actually thought challenge, okay, find the evidence for and against the thought, and actually really learn how to cognitively reframe it. And that's not an easy thing to do. It takes time and it takes patience, but I think, again, it's included in the resource. And again, I can't stress how much outdoor activity relieves stress. The endorphin factor, okay, is hugely important, you know, reducing those levels of cortisol in the brain. So I think the day needs to be punctuated now with more physical activity. The weather's getting better. It's going to be easier to do this. It's certainly going to be easier to get kids outdoors. I also think sometimes we need to think about having worry time for some of our kids. I've worked with some anxious children who come home from school and they are allowed, they're given permission to have 10 minutes where they sit and they worry. They might write them down. But what they do is they actually then learn to leave those worries. They go out, they do something lovely like walk the dog, go and play football, whatever it is. They come back in and they then sit and problem solve with that adult who can support them. Okay, so I think it's really, really important. Sometimes we can just shelve them for a bit and then come back, as long as the child knows that we're going to come back and we're going to work through them. It's not always appropriate, but sometimes this can be helpful. Again, the anxiety ladder. We can face fears by building one of these. We put the phobia, the fear, at the top of the ladder, and then we put the least anxiety provoking element of that at the bottom of the ladder, and we work up in little steps. So we say small steps as we go up to actually overcome that fear. I think it's important. The fears are not there forever. We can overcome them. We can do something about them, but children need help to do this. I use this with all my kids who have emotionally based school avoidance. I've done this for years, and it is really, really helpful. And actually, it's probably the only way to do it, because it's always step by step. You have to avoid flooding. I would never just throw a child in the water if they were frightened of the water. Okay, I would never just throw them into school if they're frightened of school. Okay, you don't do it. They won't swim, they'll sink. ACT, from positive psychology, it's ways of managing emotions, boosting well-being, self-esteem. So what are you doing on a daily basis in terms of actively looking after yourself, calming yourself and thinking effectively, challenging negative thoughts? So again, this activity is just about asking the young person to identify things that they're doing, making a list and keeping an ACT diary for a week so that they can work out, reflect upon what went well, what worked well, what didn't go quite so well. Part 3 of the publication is around Connect for Wellbeing, and I think this is vital. We're meant to be together. Children aren't attention seeking, they're, you know, attention needing. All human beings are attention needing because we need connection. We thrive for it. We want meaningful connections in our lives. So it's really, really important that we build these, because those happy, loving, nurturing relationships are contagious. And actually, these are going to be the root of us, really, root and branches, I think, of us actually beginning to get better and beginning to recover as we go back into school, those connections. So ensuring that kids can reflect on and identify happy memories, you know, having that happy memory box, you know, things will be better, things will get, look what happened in the past. Look at these lovely experiences that we had together in our families, at home or in school. And let's remember that these things will happen again. Be kind acts, really, really important. I do this and I record a daily, I record a daily gratitude diary myself. I keep a journal. I'm a firm believer in it, but I actually engage in 3 kind acts. They're not random. I plan them every day, because I think sometimes we need to focus on others. And if we are all doing that in a school community, how lovely, how happy is that school community going to be? Because we're thinking of our friends and those that we love. Social media, again, I cover this in the publication, and I think this is really important. It's not all negative. There is a lot of it that is. I found on, you know, getting active on Twitter, which I really didn't want to do. My publisher kept on and on about it because she thought it would be really good. But I'm not a social media freak at all. But having said that, I think I've learnt more from other people. I've engaged and formed these relationships and connections, which have been really, really helpful. You know, people are so brilliant at sharing. They're so kind, and there is so much expertise out there. The kids in our local area here, attached to one of my high schools up the road, created this WhatsApp group, and it was a kind messages WhatsApp group. How lovely is that? There are other kids that have actually supported each other academically, but children have been supporting each other and been buddying up in their WhatsApp groups in terms of helping each other with their mental health. Excuse me. So I'm just showing these ones because these were hot off the press. Sarah Miles at Hinton sent them to me today. As a result of what we did in the first lockdown period, my lovely colleague, Dr. Ali Demaria, and myself have produced 3 recovery toolboxes for wellbeing for early years, primary age and adolescents. And these are much more comprehensive, and there's a huge amount in these on trauma. There's a huge amount on actually building trauma-informed practice, classrooms, relationships, connections, using different approaches such as mindfulness, CBT. So I'm hoping that they will be really, really useful going forwards. And also I'm delighted to say that the Toolbox of Wellbeing Journal is now available for pre-order. So she wanted me to flag those up. Excuse me. This is the way in which they're formulated again. So the difference here is that they're specifically designed for children, young people individually and in smaller groups and whole class activities. And under those 5 parts: self-regulation, resilience building, self-esteem and social skills, effective thinking and transition. So much more comprehensive. And you can see the various information sheets. And when I say sheets, they're quite hefty documents. So I'm hoping that this will be really appropriate, not just for parents, but particularly, I think, for teachers going forwards as we really support our kids back. I want children, as I said, to have this kind of, what we call it, COVID passport, COVID plan, anxiety support plan, or just an information sheet in which they actually specify how they're going to manage their anxiety. And I think an anxiety support plan is a good idea for many of our kids. They might not all need it, but I think it's important being very specific and helping them to formulate what works for them. It might sound wacky, the things that they're writing down that work for them. That doesn't matter. It's their plan, and they can change it over time. This involves identifying their triggers, what makes it worse, what helps, when is it not so bad, what little small steps, notice small steps can I take now? What 3 things can I do to calm myself straight away? So in that first minute, in that emergency time when I might really begin to catastrophize and go into total panic mode. And then, you know, things I can do every day to look after my well-being: activity scheduling, exercise, sleep routines, etc. Who I can go to for help to talk to, And then, really important, list any websites or helplines or text lines that kids can access in order to get support straight away. So one of those needs to be 24/7. So finally, I just want to flag up this Real Recovery Plan, which I hope that people will be able to access. If you're not on Twitter, then it's on my YouTube channel, and it's an 11-minute wee PowerPoint presentation. But I wanted to just flag it up today because I think it is so important, this notion that we go back and we rebuild our connections now, and we really value this focus on our strengths, so that we can give our kids hope, you know, that they can be safe, that they can learn, they can be together again, and they can do so safely, and that there is a future for them, and they are not going to be labelled as being this COVID generation who seem to have lost out. I think there's something very resilient about our children. They're, you know, look at what they've come through, and they're going back to school, many of them on Monday, and they will feel very nervous, some of them, they will feel very anxious, but they will get through it. They have got the right kind of support, and I think teachers and schools are so aware of what children need now. And I think, so it's a shame really that some in power don't seem to, and I mustn't get too political when I say that, but having listened to our Minister for Education this week, I've been quite distressed by the focus on behaviour and behaviour hubs. I thought, well, we're all about well-being in my view. I want well-being hubs. I think it's really important just explaining to our kids that education is a lifelong journey. They don't need to feel that anxious because they will have missed bits. That's okay. This is what we're here for. We can teach you. You can catch up, okay? We can really make sure that the kids who need the additional support get it. Let's flag them up. We know who they are. Mental health leads in schools, learning mentors, the SENDCOs, etc. They are very well aware about how to screen and make sure that the children are recognised, identified on transition, and really ensuring that we plan for that transition, and we really make explicit what the rules and routines are for keeping us all safe, for keeping us well, and we celebrate being back together. Has to be nurture for all now, I think, in my view, within what I call a resilient, flexible and compassionate community. The kindness is going to really, really matter now. If we're going to make sure that all of us can catch up in all domains, you know, socially, emotionally and academically. So I think it's important. It's a really, really powerful message to give to people that we can do this together. So thank you for listening to all of that. And I hope that some of it's been useful, informative, and more than happy to take questions. So I'll stop sharing and let people come in and chat and etc. But thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Tina. I was starting to thank you and I was on mute, which is a modern day problem, isn't it? But that was absolutely fantastic. I'm sure everyone's going to agree, but just absolutely ram-packed with strategy. And one thing I want to do is I want to go back through that and just really start to take in some of those ideas to do with the breathing and the strategy, not only for our young people, but also for ourselves. And I think one thing I would say, and it's certainly something we've talked about in previous sessions, is one of the most difficult things in this pandemic is to lead young people when we're finding it so hard ourselves. And I think the focus on the positive, it is all very well, but if you yourself are feeling very low or overwhelmed or anxious, that difficulty comes. So I think there's lots in there for us as well, as well as the young people. So I think we've got one question in the chat, and then really I think we can just raise our hands and ask away. But Sarah, you had a question for Tina, and that was about what age is it perhaps appropriate to use a step plan? So Sarah works in primary. Have I got that right, Sarah?
Yes, primary school. The EP always recommends that we do a step plan, and I was just wondering at what age would you say that would be appropriate from?
I think it is appropriate from that age, if that makes sense. I don't see any issue with that. Is that all right? Yeah, I mean, I haven't got any much more really to say on that. Do you have a concern about it?
I'm just wondering whether we kind of simplify it. I know you said up to 10 steps. I don't know whether for little ones you need to do smaller steps or more steps. I haven't had to do one before, but it's something that they've recommended that I do. So just need to do a bit more work on.
Sarah, you don't have to do 10 steps. I think you can do 3 or 4. It's got to be bespoke to the child. It's like anything, you know, you'll print off a format from a publication and think, oh, I've got to do. No, you haven't. You do it, you know, the way that you think is appropriate. So if you've got a little one that says, well, I could do this, then this, then this, and sometimes I won't do it. I'll do it as a ladder. I'll do it as a staircase, you know, and I draw it out with the kids. But actually, they might want to just fill in 3 or 4 steps to begin with. They might not want to put the bit at the top in anyway. So again, it's about, you'll know, it's about being flexible. So you don't have to do 10 steps.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got any other questions for Tina, things that you want to ask? Or
Lynn, there were a couple of other questions about the when did the new books come out, and is it Hinton House?
Yeah, it's Hinton House Publishers, and it's Sarah Miles. One of the reasons I'm plugging it, and I've got to say this, is I started working with her about, I don't know, 8 years ago, and she is like a little indie book publisher. It's just her and her husband, and it's their company, and she's the most ethical, lovely, lovely human being, and her whole ethos is about mental health, putting kids first. And I've worked with lots of other publishers, and I'm not dissing any of them remotely, but I'm very passionate about working with her because I think she's got just absolutely the right ethos. They are going to be on the website. I think the journal's on the website now, and the other 3 are on the website tomorrow, and you can pre-order them. They're going to be out in about 2 weeks maximum. Absolutely, maybe even before that. So, and I think she's been pushing to get these out there because she realizes that there is such a need for it. And I know there's a huge amount of stuff available online, but what I would say sometimes about that is that people are really busy, and it's about, have you got the time to go and look through everything and access this and download that, etc., etc. Now, some of us have. I spend a lot of time actually researching things and doing that, but a lot of the parents and teachers that I work with will say, actually, I want a resource to hand that I can just pick up and it's accessible and I can use it. So yeah, they will be available on the website, and they'll be on Amazon in about 2 days' time. But I'd prefer it if you went to Hinton House if you were thinking of buying it, because Amazon just get loads of dosh and they don't do much. Sorry. Am I allowed to say that? Sorry.
I'm not sure, but anyway, thank you, Tina. Kate, Holden, Kate, you've got a question.
Thank you. Tina, we've had a lot the last few weeks of really anxious autistic students who are really overgeneralizing, really catastrophizing everything, partly due to their autism profile, I think, but a lot of this going on. So we've been doing all the, all the thinking activities that are like the CBT type thinking activities that usually work. But this time we just don't seem to be getting anywhere. So my question is, would you keep plugging at it, or do you think it may be linked? I don't know what my question is actually, but we don't know whether to keep going or whether this way of thinking and this inability to be able to change this way of thinking could just be due to autism and that rigidity of thinking, or whether you think, we will get round it if we keep going.
I think you'll get round it if you keep going. Okay. But I think, and I personally, but I think it's a big journey now, because I think that the more anxious that they're going to get, the more rigidity will be present, and they're going to have to get used to a lot of different stuff in terms of, this is a huge ask, wearing masks all day, going back into busy schools with all the noise, all the oversensitized stuff that's going on. I think it's huge. So I do think the things that worked before will work, but we're going to need more of them, and we're going to need to be more patient, and it's going to take longer, in my view.
Okay.
That's what I think. I mean, I don't know if that's, I don't know everything at all. I just think we're learning. All of us are learning now, because this is also, none of us have experienced this before. So it's about trying and trying and trying. I think what worked before should work again, but it's everything's going to take longer, you know. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Honey asked a question about the books, just asking if they had practical strategy in them and things that you can lift out. So
yes, yeah, they
Yeah.
do. They actually, what we tried to do this time is because we wanted it to be for school-based practitioners in the main, we've actually made kind of really printable worksheet type things in there. So they're all the activities you can pull out. They're not just little summaries of what you do. You've actually got activity sheets in there. So they're very, very practical, user-friendly.
Thank you. Sorry, Heather, your comment in the chat just caught me totally off guard there. You're not in Barbados, are you, honey?
No, I just thought I'd bring a bit of sunshine and joy. In actual fact, this is my latest toy. I didn't know how to change the background until I saw someone do it, and my daughter was in the room at the same time, and she said, "Oh, I can show you how to do that. This is what you do," and came across this one that moves, which is extraordinary. And the Zooms that I've been on, people have actually said it actually visually relaxes them quite a bit. So I'm trying to release lots of lovely, beautiful energy to everybody tonight.
Thank you. You always do, honey. But yeah, lovely, lovely background. Heather, you've raised your hand. Do you want to unmute? Thank you.
Thank you so much for such a positively focused session packed with really practical wellbeing ideas. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. My question is maybe a little bit late, but here we are. I'm wondering if you have any tips for the children who have been at school over the past few weeks, and tips for supporting those children whilst other children rejoin. I know that it's Friday tomorrow, but anything that we might do tomorrow, or also supporting them in the coming weeks as they adjust to being joined by more of their peers and their friends and things, and anything we might concentrate on.
Yeah, well, you've got one day tomorrow, haven't you? Which is really good. I think there's something about actually getting them to think about next week, in the sense of thinking how they'd like to welcome back their friends. I think you have to start with the positives, the fact we'll be all together again. I think it's a really good opportunity tomorrow to also be able to say, what are you worried about with people coming back? Because they'll say to you things like, I am worried about having to share, I'm worried about him coming back, I didn't like him, or I don't, it's going to be too busy in our class. And then you can actually be thinking about, well, what can we all do together to sort that? What can we do to make this as comfortable as possible for everybody? And I think there might be a nice thing to think about, how are they going to welcome back your friends? What are you going to do to build your connections with them and reinforce your connections, your friendships? Are you going to write little post-its? Are you going to do some nice little postcards to them? Are you going to stick things on their desks already, laminate things? Whatever it is, are you going to give some super messages to them to welcome them back? Are you then going to do an activity when they come back next week where you reaffirm this group as a group together? And I think, you know, it's going to be very difficult for them in some senses, because it is again about sharing the whole staff access to staff, isn't it, and the amount of time and nurture and attention you get. But I think it is really, really important to get them to think about what they do to proactively welcome back their friends, and think of some lovely, lovely ideas to celebrate being together again. So looking on the positives, but acknowledging, giving them time to acknowledge the loss that they might feel, because they will feel a sense of loss now. Some of them, not all of them.
Thank you so much. I've just written down about 100 ideas. So thank you very, very much.
And Tina, one thing I've been thinking about is how we can help children to cope with the continued change that's coming up. And I think, as you said, yeah, they have been incredibly resilient. I'm really proud of them. But how do we help them cope with that continued change without over focusing on the perhaps negatives and those challenges they're facing? I'm trying to work out how you find that balance, because there's things they're worrying about. Mm-hmm. You want to talk to them about and support them with, but also trying to move that focus perhaps to something more positive. I'm wondering what your top tips might be for those conversations or strategies.
I think it's about a balance. I think you're going to, every day there's got to be opportunity for showing gratitude, engaging in some positive psychology activities, self-regulation. You've got to factor that into a timetable. But then there's learning time, there's socializing time, there's routines that they're going to get into again. And, you know, as I said to Kate, that is just going to take time to build up again, if you see what I mean. It's not going to be kind of overnight. And I think there will be changes. There's going to be changes to the, but what do? You know, we actually prepare them for that. And it may be that our biggest change is that we find ourselves having to prepare children for change every day for the next couple of terms, dare I say it, because things will change. There is going to be another rise in cases. We're well aware of that. You know, the hospitals down here already preparing for it. So sorry, that's not to be negative, anyone. That's just, it's just going to be a reality. So I think that, you know, things will change. There'll be pockets of kids sent home again. This is going to be ongoing. So I think it's down to us to be saying, we'll prepare you for that. In as much as you can be prepared, because the government seems to give you last minute diktats when you're working in, sorry, I shouldn't say that, being political again, but I think that's really, really important. It's about preparation. And even if that means at the start of the school day, in primary in particular, just actually flagging up what the changes are, what the expectations are, because every child is going to need that level of preparation now, not just kids who have been so-called labelled with certain special needs. So I think that's really, really important. And it's knackering. It's knackering for us too. So I think the other thing is about factoring in time for staff well-being. And I do think that there's going to be a need for a bit more peer support. So, you know, the actual length of the school day, the way it's constructed, may also have to change in some instances. And I know that a lot of the schools around in my local area are thinking very differently about how they actually set up the school day and shortening things and shortening lessons. Does that help at all, Lynn?
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much. I've just seen Honey's comment about art and creatives. Something very close to your heart, Honey. In fact, you're going to bring that to our next Zoom session. But I think the arts, the creatives, the music, the sport, starting to bring those back in, because even you're talking about a sense of loss, I think a lot has been taken away in terms of those areas as well. Yeah. Not just from the peers and the friendships, but in terms of their physical development and sense of achievement. It does all pull into that self-esteem. So I think all of that hopefully will start to unfold and might not be taken away again. We're hoping not, but we've got to be hopeful, haven't we? Yeah. Any more questions for Tina, please? Everyone's looking at you beautifully. Tina, thank you again for joining us tonight, for sharing your expertise and all of those strategies. So we are going to upload a recording of this onto our website or our YouTube channel, see how we get on, and also make the slides available as well. So keep an eye out for those. I'll advertise where those are for you. So would anybody mind if I just took a quick photograph? Is that okay?
Everyone's going to hide now.
Everyone's going to hide now. Yeah, I know.
Me in Barbados.
Yeah, a photo of you in Barbados, Honey. Thank you. That'd
wonderful.
I've got two screens. I'm going to nip over onto the other one. All smile. Thank you, Tina.
Oh no, thank you. Can I just say one thing? I'm really appreciate that you asked me, and I want to say I'm really sorry if I fumbled tonight, but I am recovering from COVID, and it's taken me about a month and a half to just get a bit lucid, a bit logical. So I do apologise. I'm not making excuses, but hopefully if we meet again, which I'm sure we will, I'm more than happy to come back and do something.
Yay!
No problem. I will hopefully be a bit more coherent and less flushed.
Tina, you've been incredibly coherent. So please don't apologise. I've had COVID myself, and Morag would laugh at my brain fog. It's hard to find the vocabulary and actually link those words together. But
Absolutely.
tonight, you might have felt it has, but it hasn't. So again, thank you. When all you want to do is probably just have a sleep, but no,
No, a gin, Lynn, a gin.
a gin.
Yeah, come on, get it
we'll
real.
do that. But thank you. I will love to have you back, of course. So I shall get you ready for next academic year. But
Super.
thank you to everybody. Thanks for joining us. Next time, we meet every month. Next time, Honey from Barbados, possibly
Lovely.
sharing art and the importance of art and creativity for mental health and well-being. So you're more than welcome to join us again. So we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone.